Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of PodIsa, where we explore stories, insights, and strategies of leaders driving meaningful change in healthcare. I'm your host, Isabella Castro, and today I'm thrilled. Let's find a better word for Peter because I think he deserves it. I am so happy and excited to have Peter Lachman as our guest. Dr. Lachman is recognized globally for his experience in patient safety, quality improvement, and leadership. He works across different countries. In Ireland, he delivers programs to develop clinical leaders in quality improvement at the Royal College of Physicians in Ireland. In Africa, he works on patient safety and quality programs in Sudan, Tanzania, Ethiopia, and Mozambique for the HSE Global Health Program. He is the director of the Patient Safety Movement Foundation Global Patient Safety Fellowship Program. He is the former CEO of the International Society for Quality in Healthcare, ISQua, and he was a Health Foundation Quality Improvement Fellow at IHI from 2005 to 2006. He's a senior fellow. And was the deputy medical director with the lead for patient safety at Great Ormond Street Hospital for 10 years. 26 to 2016. He was also a consultant pediatrician at the Royal Free Hospital in London, specializing in the challenge of long-term conditions for children. Previously, he was a medical director and clinical director of pediatrics at Northwest London NHS Trust from 1996 to 2004, pediatrician at Queen's Medical Center at Nottingham from 1994 to 1996, consultant pediatrician and head of clinic child development at Red Cross War Memorial Children's Hospital in Cape Town and South Africa 1987 up to 1994. Dr. Lachman is also the lead editor of the Handbook of Patient Safety, published in 3 editions, April 2022, co-editor in published in December 2022, and editor published on February 2024. Well, let's dive into this insightful conversation of this impressive bio. Welcome, Dr. Lachman, and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Isabella. It's always a pleasure to see you.
I'm your fan. How does your fellows call you? I remember a physician from England when we were together in a webinar. She said, "Ah, you are one more of." She used the name I forgot now. One of the people who follows you like a fan, Peter Fan. I forgot, but I'm certainly one of that. So,
The
okay.
India ones, and someone who they think is experienced, they call Baba. so, so it's almost like grandfather, I guess. I'm not that. Yeah.
Out. Lovely, lovely.
Okay. So that's the story. Yeah. So I'm
Yeah,
just
it
gonna
is.
reach over.
It is. It is.
Okay.
Well, I'm gonna call you Dr. Lachman.
Yeah.
With technology, we never know, and when we both meet, there is always energy.
Just I was trying the earbuds, and then they kind of were making a mistake, so I took them out, and then everything fell apart. That's what happens with technology, which is very interesting because you one of the things you might want to talk about is my interest in human factors and how we design things to work. And in healthcare, often they never test it out to be practical.
Yeah.
And so what happened? So what happened there is a typical human factors issue that happens in hospitals all the time is that something goes wrong at the most critical time. You're starting the interview, and then suddenly it
Yeah.
stops working. And so you might be in an ICU, and suddenly everything stops working, and then poor the person
Yeah. Man of the blue.
happens. Yeah,
Are you in Ireland today?
yeah. I'm in Ireland today. I've been back. I was on holiday for a while, but I'm in Ireland back today. It's a lovely sunny day in Ireland.
Oh wow! I hope I don't take much of your time, so you can enjoy your day, sunny day. I would like to start, Dr. Lachman, having a little bit of your background and how you did first become interested in healthcare. You know, pediatrician dealing with children, families, other physicians. Why patient safety and quality improvement? When did you get it, your heart? That's what I want to be. And then you became a super expert and leader, worldwide recognized leader on that. When did you start it? And you had like a call on that.
Well, I come from a medical family. My father's a general practitioner, so I grew up in a medical family, and my brother's a cardiologist. My sister's a speech therapist, and I'm a pediatrician, and my third brother's an economist, my second brother. So he was the one that didn't like medicine. But so we come from a medical family, and really running patient safety is it's really you always remember the first time that you had an incident. I've been fortunate that I've never actually knowingly, I don't know of anyone I've harmed, but I'm often had to be the person who supported someone who has harmed them. When I was a young doctor, another colleague, a younger doctor, a house officer, and I was the registrar. He gave a baby potassium chloride instead of sodium chloride, and the baby died. And that was my first event. In those days, we didn't realize that that was a human factors event rather than a human error that he could be blamed for. And of course, he lost his job, so I didn't realize that's a subliminal start to my career on patient safety, because it's many years later that I got involved in patient safety. And if I look at my history of the journey, I soon became almost what was like a ghostbuster, the person who came up after a big event and to sort things out. When I was in South Africa, my focus was on child abuse. And so I was an expert, a so-called expert in child abuse. My first postgraduate degree was in child abuse. And child abuse is also about safety. So in a way, I was involved in patient safety when it wasn't called patient safety, it was called something else. And when I went to the UK, it was because a nurse had allegedly murdered a few babies. They called it Munchausen proxy, but now in retrospect, when I came back, that was 1994. So it was total system failure. It was a patient safety failure where they said it was a person failure, but it was a systems failure. And they never thought about it that way. And then I moved and so on and on and on. I moved everywhere I moved was because there was a systems failure somewhere, and they asked me to come and do it. And then finally in 2004, and I remember in 2004, I'd been a pediatrician for a long time, and I'd been running departments. I got the opportunity to go to IHI, and that was at the start of when patient safety movement was really starting and quality improvement. To Urge Human was published in 2000 or so, and Crossing the Quality Chasm around there, 1998, 2000. So it was very early days that I started on getting efficiently into patient safety, even though I'd been doing it all along. I've got many stories about it, but I'm just giving those the key highlights. So when I got to IHI, that's where I got opening my eyes that this is a real science on patient safety and quality improvement. And then the rest is history. For the last 20 years, since then, I have been honing my skills in quality and safety.
Probably there is always a system that fails, but there isn't always someone who decides to challenge the status quo and fix the system. Congratulations on your journey.
Yeah, if I could just say it, is that people are part of systems, and they go to work every day not to harm people.
Sure.
And they sometimes the system fails, and that's because of poor design or there are many different factors. And healthcare went on a blame route. You do have occasionally where someone deliberately harms someone, but that's the rare occasion. In most cases, the process hasn't worked or hasn't been sorted out, and you get caught up in the process, and the holes align, and then the harm happens. So, many of the factors in patient safety and quality that I've learned. So what I was thinking 20 years ago is very different to what I think now.
Yeah, sure. It's pretty much about the systems rather than the people. It's like that. I love that IHI quote. Every system is perfectly designed to get the results it gets. This is one of the first sentences we hear and we see in IHI when we go to the headquarters.
Yeah, that's attributed to Paul Batalden, and I'm working with Paul right now on the latest thing of what systems are and so on. But a system is designed to get what you're going to get. I mean, that's for sure. The only problem is that most healthcare systems haven't been designed, so we don't know what we're going to get because they really haven't been designed, and that's
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Lachman, and with this background, and you've become known and famous for your leadership roles all around the world. And one of them being CEO of International Society of Quality in Healthcare, ISQua, where we met and where I'm profoundly grateful because you gave me a lot of opportunities. Are you happy to walk us through your leadership philosophy and how it has evolved over time? How the personality of a leader is built and through the relationship with people, and in your case, with multiple personalities in multiple countries, multiple cultures, how it can shape the way you behave with people and the way you get maturity in your own abilities to be a leader.
well. I've had leadership roles way before I went to ISQua. My first leadership roles were back in South Africa when I was a student. I was a member of the student council. I was the vice president of the medical student council. I was leading in the fight against apartheid, very minimally leading, I guess. I spent time in prison for that, as you know. So I don't normally talk about it, but if I have to say whether to come back, I realized that as a student leader, you have to you have to lead by example. So the first thing I thought is that you have to lead by example. You have to have principles. You have to have values. You have to have a mission. You have to have a goal. And can you imagine that as a student leader, where you have 10,000 students in your university and you now represent them in negotiations, and you're doing marches and protests and so on. So that's where I first learned my leadership, was as a student leader at medical school and when I was at university. And that was in reflection, I never really think about that going backwards, but that's just where it started. So then when I go to the next roles, and now I go to my medical training, I become the chief resident, or the chief registrar, and I'm leading the registrars in training. And that was another leadership role that happened. And there I learned the principle is that as a leader, you need to be fair and just at all times, and transparent and compassionate when you're dealing and looking after the well-being of the people you're looking for, because that's what I had to do as the leader of the doctors in training who were working long hours. But I had to be fair all the time and ensure that everyone had an equal chance to work Christmas, for example. Everyone had to work equal chance. And those are little things you have to do. And also when they had difficult times, how to hold their hand, as their representative. So those were leadership roles before I even graduated as a doctor. I was doing leadership first as a student at the university, and then as a trainee doctor before I became a pediatrician. And then the next step was I became a head of a department in South Africa. And my first belief in leadership there was an equitable leadership. What I thought, I said that I'm not going to be a leader. Everyone needs to take turns being a leader. I'll just be the adjudicator to make sure everyone has a good turn. And they always wanted to say, well, who's going to make the final decision? You see, so and so I realized that even if you're a compassionate leader and someone who believes in equity and leadership, which I believed in, uh, you still have to make decisions, and someone has to make the decisions. So that was a very good school. So I had very good training in South Africa on what a leader has to be. But the main thing is having good principles and values. In South Africa, and I think around the world, right now in the political system, you're either for or against. If you don't, not for or against, you fall. So it's quite simple like that. So in the part South Africa, you're either for or against politics. You couldn't say, well, I'm not sure. You're either for or against. Which camp are you in? And so I learned that those are the principles you have to have and values. And you have to stick by them. How many times we went on boycotts of foods because the workers were striking and held the principles and so on. So that was a very good learning school for me on leadership. So when I came into healthcare, I started as a leader when I was training, and then I became a head of departments, and where I tried out different forms of leadership with the teams, and I realized the importance of teamwork. And a very good example of that is that the team was a bit dysfunctional when it started, so we went to Indian food cooking class for 12 weeks to demonstrate how every member of the team is important. Because when you make an Indian food, everyone's role is important because they had to eat the food after they cooked it. So the most menial one, the one who's chopping or the one who's making the rotis, at the end, the most important one is not the supervisor who's supervising that evening, because we had 12 members of staff and every week someone else would be supervising. They all realized that every role is important in the team. So then you realize that teams are very important. So I learned that very early on. But that was because of the circumstances in South Africa. So I was fortunate to have my leadership training in many different ways in South Africa. And I think that happens when you're in a repressive society. You can learn that you can choose to or you can choose not to. So when it comes to moving on to the careers, and I've gone to leadership roles one after the other, and when I came to ISQua, I already had behind my back many years of understanding that my job at ISQua was not to lead and to do. My job was to change things. That I came in as a transformative leader. That you might say I was tasked to be a transformative leader to change the organization. But I wasn't going to change the organization. The people who were working with me were going to change the organization. And that's of the office staff. They were the ones going to change the organization. I was going to do things in place, and I had to change it against a lot of barriers because traditionalists don't like change, even though they employed me to do the change. And in that stage, because my leadership is really, I'm a change person. I'm not a stable person. Once I've done the change, I tend to move on. And I've been through numerous leaders' roles because, yeah, it's not I like changing things and then I want someone else to stabilize. That's every role I've done that. I've made the changes and I said, now someone else can do the rest because I get bored after a few years. So after 6 years, around about year 6, I got bored because it's not changing. Now it's stable. I've done what I have to do. So that's with ISQua. And even now, if you look at ISQua now, you'll see a lot of the things we brought in are now bearing fruit. 4 or 5 years ago, if you look at the programs they have at the conference, look at some of the initiatives on patients, on co-production, on safety, and so on, and look at the people on the board right now. Those are all the results of the early fruits. Not that I did. I just created the environment for the team to blossom and for the long-term prosperity of the organization from a moral and visionary point of view. Now there's someone else who's doing a very good job in bedding down all of these things. And that's a different kind of leader that you need. So you need leaders for different things. That's a method. But I've been fortunate. It's a long answer to a very complex question.
No, necessary answer. I was honored I have witnessed that, a little part of that. And I remember you another day. In Brazil, they have launched a documentary about Ayrton Senna. Have you heard about Ayrton Senna, a pilot a Formula One pilot. And despite his challenge, he have faced a lot of challenges to have a position in a company, in an international company. And there is a part of the movie that the CEO of the English company says, he's brilliant, I know, but he's not English. I want an English guy. He's Brazilian. And I remember you at that time because you were the first international leader that gave me a seat. And I will never forget that. And I'm not saying this because we are here together. You really made a difference for me. Peter, it's this kind of equity is so interesting depending on the perspective. I am Brazilian. I grew up in Brazil, in Rio de Janeiro. I became a dentist, but I got into this world of patient safety and quality improvement like 10, 15 years. And I have the very strong mother. And I recognize it myself as a white woman. Because here in Brazil, we have a multicultural, like miscegenation of people. But when I started this journey of traveling abroad in this international network, and then I kind of started to face like some direct racism, other indirect, other like subjective, other unconscious bias. And then I started to see, oh wow, I think I'm brown. And then it's nice to be brown. I love to be brown nowadays. I declare myself brown in Brazil, United States, everywhere. But in Brazil, I do not suffer any kind of racism. And I don't know why we got into this at this part of the podcast, really. I think it's because you are one of the persons who did not care at all. You did not give a damn for the fact that I was Brazilian, for the fact that maybe for an island position, I was a brown woman. You just, maybe you saw me some talent, some bravery that you were right. My mother gave me some kind of, she can do something. And I guess you were right. I think we are pretty much, we have a very, in, in my point of view, I think we have a very similar personalities. I do love to go somewhere and do change. I love being creative, do change, and then move. I think keep going there and sustaining. I think a little bit boring. I have to be honest. I like to get like brainstorm. Wow, do a mass, help people, and then move on. So now you're good. Keep going. Call me if you need me something. And part of that, no, I think most of that I've learned from you, and I want to make a public recognition of that. After you, there were some, but you were the first one, and the first we never forget. Thank you so much. And you know that after you, there were other doors that opened for me. I have shared it with you. I don't want to cry today. So let's move on after this emotional part that was not part in the script. Let's move on. Oh, Brazilian woman, who knows what's gonna happen when we have a conversation with them. I think we have covered a little bit of equity, patient challenges, system gaps, system failing. Let's discuss a little bit of pioneering patient inclusion. I think this is another subject that you are super expert and like a trailblazer. One element that sets you apart is your push to actively include patients in healthcare discussions. And that's why you are always in WHO in Geneva when they have WHO campaigns about person centered care. Could you share what inspired you to make patient such an integral part of patient safety and quality initiatives?
Well, uh, you have to go back to my clinical position because I was a pediatrician, and in Cape Town I was running the child development clinic. So I've seen children with cerebral palsy, and in a low resource country, South Africa is actually high resource for Africa, but in those days, if you weren't white, you were low resource, and that's my clinics. And I used to love working with the people. who we call patients. And the mothers were the ones who had to carry the can, as they say, had to manage the complex situations they found themselves in. And if you didn't develop a partnership with them, then it wasn't going to work. And there's a hierarchy, and I always found it difficult, the hierarchies in healthcare. And and also the other issue is because I come from South Africa, uh, I can see equity and inequity very quickly. I can just see through it. And so I always thought that healthcare was inequitable, and not only inequitable, but even in any consultation was inequity because the healthcare provider and the healthcare receiver weren't on an equal playing field. But I knew that in order to get results, you had to get them equal. And so I've always had that's my philosophy. And so when I moved into the wider spheres, my first question was always in the clinical sphere was to ask myself, have I treated the patient or the parent and the child equitably? And then I move into the more strategic role is how do we design healthcare systems to be equitable? The society is very inequitable. And how do we ensure that our outcomes are equitable? And then I move into international organizations like ISQua. And I came and there was a patient rep, but a very inequitable representation. She wasn't really isolated. So my idea was there to change. The key thing was to say, well, how can we put patients, even before ISQua, when I was at Great Ormond Street, I said every quality improvement team had to have a parent representative on this, an equal partnership. Not someone who you listen to, but someone who's a partner who has got equal power as the healthcare providers. Because often it's just tokenism. People consult, they don't come on. And I think that's where people are. So I was doing this long before I came to ISQua, and then in ISQua, I wanted to transform them as part of my role. And that's where I brought the patient council in and the patients and as you know, it was quite difficult because the traditionalists in the organization would see this as a threat to their power. And that's what happens. It's throughout healthcare. And when you say, well, what healthcare is about, it's about people. And you have to have hierarchies, but you have to have equity. In that people who call patients should be able to have freedom to speak up and freedom to talk. And that's very difficult. And then the other thing is, it's not only equity there, it's equity within society, as that's how unjust society is. And I really believe that you have to have you have to have justice. That's the key thing that you have to have in society. And that becomes very difficult because I always believe that doctors are really political agents if they choose it's a for or against, so are you for or against? That's always my belief. And if you keep silence, you are for. And if so that's where it is. So you have to call things out. And we used to in South Africa, we used to go into the rural areas and we used to work with the poorest people because we wanted to improve their care. And even right now, my work I do with going to in Africa, that's us do it because it's all about making sure that they get an opportunity to improve care and about equity. I think that's very important for people in life. So you're part of what I do as a leader.
Yeah, it's just like music to my ears, inclusion and belonging. It's
Yeah.
help people feel safe and build trust in any relationship, especially in healthcare, which is such a delicate one.
Well, healthcare is about, this is my latest work we're doing is the question is healthcare a product or a service? Uh, Most of the time it's a product. We sell something to people and you have an operation. Actually, I do want a product. I want a good operation, but do I want a service which is all about relationships? I want a relationship. I want a service with a good product in that service, but I don't want just a good product. And most of the time that you get complaints and so on from people is that they're only getting product. They're not getting service. And the question, so how can we incorporate this idea that we're in the service industry, not in the health industry? And the service industry is about having ensuring people are getting a good product and a good experience at the same time.
Great, great point. And with that, let's get the first topic. With that said, looking ahead, how do you see the field of patient safety and quality evolving the next decades? Well, with this stuff, technology, artificial intelligence, new models of leadership, and I think
So
I think that will make a revolution in terms of relationship and patient participation. Absolutely. Are there any emerging trends or technology that excite you or scare you? Any tips on that? How do you see the next 10 years?
So you remember, I've been around for a long time now, and the pre-internet stage in which doctors did hold all the knowledge. We then went into Dr. Google stage, and doctors still held all the knowledge because Dr. Google wasn't so good. And now we're in the AI stage, in which AI, if you open my Dr. Google and I type in a condition, a patient types in something, I've got these things, up will come a diagnosis and everything, synthesis, and it's going to get stronger and stronger. And that empowers the patients. But you must remember, all of these things are tools, because at the end of the day, AI can never give you compassion. Machine can never be compassionate. And that's a very important part of being a doctor, is being compassionate. So AI, I see as just supporting tools. Both for the patient, we call a patient, the person we call a doctor. They're both really supporting. So in the old days, when I was doing clinical care, I'd have my computer open on Google, and when the patients came in, I said, "Where have you been looking?" So we can look together at the website to make sure that you're looking at the right stuff, because there's a lot of rubbish up there. And
Love it.
let's choose what you have to look at. And so now, if I was doing it now, I'd say, which AI thing are you using to Google to look at what's wrong with your child? Because I had these children who had very complex conditions, and I'd say, let's look together so we make sure you get the right stuff. And
I
that
love it. I have to share it ASAP with my friends.
yeah, because otherwise, what happens is we say, don't look it up. You say to the patients, this is wrong with your child, but don't look it up. And that's the first thing they're going to do. I'm going to give you this.
For sure.
First thing they're going to do is go look it up. So I said, well, let's decide where you're going to look it up. So you're looking up the real stuff, not the bad stuff, because there's a lot on the internet that is not really good. So you say, where's patient safety going to go? I think artificial intelligence is going to be very important in helping us as a tool. But at the end of the day, you cannot be safe unless it's a culture of safety. So you can have as many of these tools as you like, unless it's a culture of safety and people believe in it. It's not. In my most recent article I wrote with a friend, says that what we have to do in patient safety is ensure that it is in the genome of every healthcare worker. And what does that mean? Does that mean in the future, every healthcare worker has patient safety inserted in their DNA at the time of their training? Imagine what that means. If it's inserted into their DNA at the time of their training, then that's what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. Currently, that's not the case. So the biggest change will have to be in how we educate for safety. I think that it's been an afterthought, and even right now, I was asked the other day, what did I think about patient safety? I think it's still a niche market. It's not something that's widespread. We who work in the field, you go to conferences, you go to IHI, and you see 3,000 or 4,000 people, and you think this is a big thing, and you think, well, oh no, it's not a big thing. There's 3,000 or 4,000 people, but look how many doctors in the country have never heard of IHI, or never heard of patient safety, who've never heard of all the different things you have to do. And I think that is a scary part, because it's still very early days. And it's how can we make the changes at scale that are important. And I've just written a blog on which is called "It's Time to Make Patient Safety a Social Movement." And what I mean by social movement is that if you think about the people on climate change, They go on mass demonstrations, they lie down in the streets, and they get things done because they have made it into a social movement. Patient safety has become a social movement in which the citizens stop and say, we are not taking this anymore. You have to change. But the reason they don't do that is for the history of medicine, because your relationship with your doctor is very different to your relationship with the tree or relationship to the climate. It's a very personal thing. And being ill is a very personal thing. And so people don't go marching on demand for patient safety. So it's a very complex about how we can make it into a social movement. But that's where I think we have to go. And that's what said to the WHO is that we have to, we understand, we know how to improve, we know what to do, but do we know why we need to do it? And I think they've concentrated too much on, we have got adverse events, so we have to fix it. And this is what you have to do, and this is how we're going to regulate you. Rather than getting the why, which is, this is why we have to do it. This is why you need to be safe. Then how, in your role, how you can be safe, how you can do it every day. So we missed a bit of a trick there. So it's got to change because at the end of the day, it's all about the culture of safety.
Sure.
Have as many tools as you like. You can have AI, you can have electronic records, you can have regulations, you can be accredited. At the end of the day, if the organization doesn't have a culture of safety, nothing is going to work.
Yeah. I personally think it's more tricky for patients and families to get to go on board on a social movement because I think they're afraid of being offensive because of
Yeah.
what you said. I agree because of the relationship with the physician, which is like you said, is different of like to advocate for climate change. If you advocate for your own health, you are like, I am advocating for my own health, but at the same time, I am being offensive with my doctor. And
Yeah,
that's a cultural thing. And we have to, and unfortunately, Peter, I don't have patience at all. I have to work on that. But this is something that I might admit it takes time to change.
yeah, it's a very philosophical thing of how we can move beyond that. But for me, the patient safety movement needs to change from what it's been doing on the concentration of what you have to do. So if you look at the WHO Global Action Plan, it's all what you have to do. Even the why they have there is not good. The what and how. This is what you have to do, and a bit of how you have to do it. But the real why, that's a very difficult thing to do. And how do you get the what into action and implementation is even more difficult. So it is very complex, and I'm not I'm not that confident that they're going to meet the needs in order to do that unless we start thinking radically differently. Because what people do is they say, "Oh, it's a complex adaptive system. It's so complex. There's different people and so on." But I'd say, look, if you're really thinking you want to be safe, you're really thinking you want to be safe, you design a safe hospital. If you really want, you design a safe hospital. You'd have safe operating procedures. You'll be reviewing your data regularly on safety. You'll be educating for safety. You'll be talking about safety every time. And the nurses will be called safety officers, nurses. They walk on, they're safety officer, not nurses, they're safety officers, there to keep the patient safe while they're nursing. And you see that we you change it. And in aviation, it's good because as an example, if you ever travel on Air France, the flight attendants are called safety officers. That's awesome. I was speaking to one about this when I flew on them recently, and she had a red badge, safety officer. So I said, I'm I'm a working patient safety, and this is wonderful to see that you got this thing, safety officer. Does it really mean things? She says, yes, they go on training all about it. That safety is good. And how they did that, they had a major event. Remember the plane that was going, I think, to Rio or came off from Rio and went into the sea and was never found. That was their seminal event. And then they realized they have to change their philosophy. And now everyone on the plane is a safety officer, not a flight attendant or a pilot. They're there to keep people safe. And we've got
Mm.
in that. We've got to change the philosophies. Every docs and this will work. I say we work in a high risk environment. Our job is to keep the people who come here safe, the staff and the patients. We have to keep them safe while we're treating them. Not we treat them and respond to adverse events.
Yeah, we are always being reactive, reacting to a system. I agree. I agree. So let's stand together and help transform the world with this. Well, we are coming to a close and a conclusion. Unfortunately, I could stay here an entire day having this conversation with you, Dr. Lachman. This has been an enlightening conversation. We have covered a rich part of your journey, leadership lessons, the importance of patient inclusion and belonging, the future of patient safety and quality, part of patient safety system failures. But before we wrap up, are you happy to share with us one final piece or advice or inspiration with our audience?
Well, I think that the key thing is to be curious. Always be curious. Have courage, because if you don't have courage, you're not going to get anywhere. Be honest. Be humble. Be open to new ideas. I could go on with these things. To be inclusive and to remember that in healthcare, we're dealing with people who, at that point, when they come into the hospital or clinic, they're feeling very vulnerable, and knowing how to deal with the vulnerability in a compassionate, passionate, and respectful way, even if you're busy, even if you're busy, even more so if you're busy and very helpful. So so what I say to most people now is one person at a time. And you know the starfish, do you know the starfish story about the man on the beach and the starfish? Have you heard that one?
No.
The man was walking on a beach, was covered with starfish, and he was picking up the starfish and throwing it into the sea. And another man was walking on the beach and said to him, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm throwing the starfish into the sea." He said, "But look, there's so many, you're not going to be able to do much." He picked up another one. He said, "It means a lot for this one," and threw it into. So remember that you start with one, and then you have to pick up another one and another one. And so if you're kind to one person, they'll be kind to you. And I'm a patient right now, and whenever I go to the hospital, I will ask whoever it is, the receptionist, the nurse, as the patient, I'll say, "How are you today? What's your day been like?" And guess what happens? I get kindness back. So for every small bit of kindness. So the last thing I'm going to say, always be kind. It doesn't cost you anything. Thanks a lot for asking me.
Yeah. At the end of the day, we are all humans, no matter which hat we are wearing. If we are patients, families, if we are on the other side at the hospital serving people, we are all humans. That was a lovely piece.
Yeah.
Teacher, thank you so much. Thanks once again, Dr. Lachman, and I'm profoundly grateful. It's so nice to be with you, even virtually. You know that I love you, And I am so grateful and I'm so happy to have you today. I hope we can catch up October here in Brazil. And thank you also to our listeners for running into this podcast, PodIsa. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing and sharing it with your colleagues. And I'm gonna share this. You're probably seeing YouTube or you are seeing a piece in my social media, and I'm sure I'm tagging Dr. Lachman so you can follow him too in his social media because he's very active. See you next time. Keep striving for excellence in healthcare. Bye.
Bye, everyone.